data analysis. Sorry. Yes. Also, this meeting is being recorded. I needed to mention that too. We will also. So sorry for. Also, she has performed data analysis using quantitative methods, and recently she completed her master's degree and from master's degree in data science track from Columbia University. She previously worked at DFSO, and she has interned in UNDP in Nepal and worked in promoting financial literacy in Nepal with the Central Bank of Nepal and services such as she serves as executive board member for FIN LIT Nepal too. Um, and we'll be present. Samiksha will present a slide on data science, and then I'll be asking some of the questions. I encourage everyone to post their post their questions on comments on FB page so that I can ask her after the presentation. So
Thank you, Anshu, for introducing me, and apologies, everyone. We had some technical glitch with the Facebook Live, but hopefully we'll be able to use this recording as well to reach a larger audience. And yes, Pratik, I think you've raised the question if we can post the question on Zoom. So feel free to do that as well. And we will try to address your questions as far as possible. And thank you, Anshu, for the introduction, and Ravi for giving me the opportunity to be here and talk to you about some of my experiences in data science and the space of social science and public policy. So I'm very excited to share some of my experiences. How we thought this might be, we thought about this talk today as dividing it into two sections, where one section, maybe I thought I would present a little bit about some of the application of data science in the social science space. And then moving from there, we have some questions and answers. We have some questions that Anshu has prepared and collected based on some of your thoughts before. And then we will also try to address new questions as they come by. So I guess without further ado, I'll share a little bit about my experiences in data science, and feel free to send your questions in the Zoom chat as well. I might not be able to see it immediately, but Anshu, please ping me. So I'm a I'm working as a research specialist at ESOC lab at Princeton University. And before joining this role, I also worked at the Poverty Action Lab in India. And I've also had a little bit of experience in the US financial sector. And so I did my master's in quantitative methods in the social sciences. And this is a master's program that I did from Columbia University. I just graduated, but while I was a part of this program, while I was studying, I started working with Princeton, and I have been continuing with them as of now. To give you a little bit of insights about some of the application of data science, I prepared a short presentation, but it will be more brief and quick in terms of the different applications. So I will not be having enough time to go into the nitty-gritty details, but I thought because we have a very, very diverse audience, I thought maybe some of you might be interested in knowing application of data science, but for some of you who are already very advanced in this space, for you it might be redundant to know about the applications. So let me start with the presentation now. Let me see if you can share my screen. 1 second. Please let me know if you can see the presentation slides. Can you see the presentation slides? Anshu, can you let me know?
We can see the presentation.
Awesome. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the opportunities and challenges in the data science space. In terms of the opportunities, I think there's a lot of rapid advancement in information and technology, as you must have been aware of. So there's a lot of wealth of data, and which can be leveraged to making a lot of evidence-based policies in the current day and age. Given the volume of data that we have present, we can move from more anecdotal evidence to more and more quantitatively rigorous data. And there are different aspects of this data. One of the application involves prediction, which might be something that enables governments and other stakeholders to take actions before a crisis can happen, or for example, predicting about refugee inflows so you can plan ahead of time or to better manage a crisis. There's also a lot of promise in merging large data sets that were collected separately. So I'll talk about some examples in this space as well, but it's possible that data has been collected. There's survey data, but there's also a completely different data set, but you can really merge those very large data sets to derive larger insights. And be using it as variables. And today, with the whole advancement in technology and the amount of data, I think it's all become a lot more possible. In terms of the challenges, though, I think there can be data of poor quality. There's possibility of data having a lot of observations, but it may not be a representative sample. Um, Similarly, we've also been critically reflecting a lot on how data can have systematic biases, and it can perpetuate these biases. Especially, a lot of times there can be this opinion that data is so unbiased. It's something that is data and you just derive conclusions out of it. But a lot of times it can be that it already has a systematic bias. And so taking data at its face value can also be a very big challenge. Um, there's also a very big advancement in the usage of text as data in today's day and age, natural language processing. And there is definitely a lot of challenges using text as data, because even though we've made a lot of progress in understanding text as data, I think there's still a lot of challenge in obviously human ways of using irony, satire, for example. So using text data can also be challenging, and it can vary by context. And I think with social media data, what we observe online may not always reflect offline behaviors. So there is a very big influx of using social media data these days to understand a lot of things. And so I think that's also a big challenge, because we cannot really assume that whatever we see online is also going to be reflected offline. Um, and now I want to kind of give you guys some examples of applications of data science. And I think the main reason for doing this is to motivate you all to see the different kinds of applications, especially for people who don't have as much background in data science. I wanted to motivate you all to think about some of these applications. One of the space that I've been working on with Princeton is disinformation. So a lot of times social media has been used to promote disinformation campaigns using various tactics when communicating with users on social media. This is a space that is very challenging, and a lot of fake accounts have been used to manipulate user behavior. If you have heard about the whole Cambridge Analytica case, there was a lot of usage of social media data to influence voter behavior, and it was a big problem which caused a huge a huge concern in the whole social media landscape of things and how it was threatening democracy. So these are some of the stats I wanted to share in terms of how social media can be manipulated to really spread polarizing messages. 89% use computational propaganda to attack political opposition based on this specific data set that was provided by Facebook. And based on data analysis done by Professor Tamar Mitz at Columbia. And so a lot of social media disinformation and manipulation data kept coming in, and that led to a lot of actions by a lot of social media companies in recent day and age, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. They've been taking a lot of actions, and that action is based on the fact that there was evidence that social media was being misused time and again to promote violence and polarizing opinions or just threatening democracy. So this is a very interesting example that our professor had shown us in class. This talks about how images can be manipulated to spread political propaganda. So you can see how campaigns are designed for virality across platforms. So this is an example of a political candidate from Philippines whose picture was edited and viral. It went viral on social media, but it was a picture that showed that they had voted, but it was manipulated in a different way to give like a negative message about the candidate. So I think one space for social media to really improve and solve public policy problems is how do we catch bad actors, and how do we prevent this sort of media manipulation through data and an analysis. This is through image, but there is also a lot of deep fakes, a lot of videos where you manipulate and share videos about political campaigning, political opponents. And so that creates a lot of threat to democracy. This is a slide from one of the projects that I worked on. So this is something I myself did. We looked at data from BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed journalist had collected a bunch of stories from the 2016 US elections, and they labeled it as being fake news and true news. So using natural language processing, a method, TF-IDF, I looked at the two sets of corpuses for fake news and real news. And this TF-IDF, term frequency inverse document frequency, it kind of gives you a metric for important terms, not necessarily most frequent, but actually more rare and more important terms in the two sets of corpuses to kind of distinguish what are the important terms between the two comparatively. So in this, we saw very importantly in the fake news corpus, candidate Hillary Clinton came up a lot, and a lot of misinformation about the private mail issue that was coming up during her campaign. This AIDS, drug, and HIV/AIDS Foundation. So that comes from the fact that misinformation was spread that Clinton Foundation was giving watered down, bad quality medicines to HIV patients in Africa. And this was also fake news people were spreading to discredit this political candidate. So you can very clearly see how we can use some kind of data science evidence to also say, like in two sets of corpuses, you can clearly see that one candidate was discredited more in election time, in the election related news coverages in the US. This is another example that I really like, how we can use Twitter, or we can use a lot of, if we have some geolocated data, or if not geolocated, there are also different kind of machine learning methods, different kind of data science methods through which you can try to map down on geolocations or inferential ways to find geolocations. And this is a very interesting example. It shows you how Twitter accounts that are disseminating ISIS propaganda are spread. So it gives you like more stronger clusters in certain regions, and that helps you really think about how you would address public policy problems like this, terrorism problems like this, and how you can use Twitter data to address big problems as such. This is another example. This is not from my project, but I found this very interesting from a recent study that I was doing on UNHCR and how they apply micro-targeted ads. So I talked to you about how people's voter behavior can be manipulated using different variables to really try to micro-target ads to influence their voting decision. That's like a way of bad usage. This in particular is a more trickier one because this is not necessarily a bad usage. This is about people. UNHCR applies targeted ads on people who consented to give this data, and they are people who have provided this data either through surveys or through being part of UNHCR's older events. And so based on their data, people different variables can be used to try to understand your donor audience, and you can micro-target ads to them to try to increase more funding for the UN. So I found this very interesting application, and you can see how like there's variation between male and a female candidate and their spending patterns. So something like this is already done by a lot of profit-making companies, but you can also use this to generate a lot of like donations, and it has actually been used by UNHCR as a very, very strong model to generate a lot of funding. So they have data on that. And how they do it is they build machine learning models using survey responses, and the model is trained on individuals' geographic, demographic, and behavioral information. And after the model is built, they apply the coefficients to every individual on the base file, and they come up with like a score on how likely this person, based on their real data, how likely are they to support the UNHCR's mission. And based on these different metrics, they target their ads in different ways to raise more funding to help refugees. So I think this is a very interesting application as well. Another example that I can give you of is how socioeconomic data from nighttime, daytime satellite imagery. So for the night, it would be the night lights. For the day, it would be the satellite imagery that can be used to really try to make proxies to understand natural disasters, to understand areas of poverty, and using machine learning to identify features in daytime satellite imagery that can predict areas with extreme poverty. So this is an application, not to say like it's so easy, but these are some of the applications that people are really trying to work on, and every day they're trying to improve these models. You can see the source for this paper, combining satellite imagery and machine learning to predict poverty, for example, is one of the applications. And this was 2016. So by the time it's 2021, like a lot of progress has been made in making these models better. One space that I have worked on is also COVID-19 misinformation. And we tracked a lot of data on our own on how misinformation on COVID was being spread around the world. And while doing this, we really were able to see variation across different countries in COVID-19 misinformation. And one of this very interesting was the case of Russia, where we saw that majority of the narratives were focusing on undermining target country institutions, mostly the Western institutions. And we didn't see as big of a fraction of really trying to undermine target countries by any other country. There were some aspects of propaganda from other countries as well, But Russia in particular, from our data, we were able to see like they really are trying to focus a lot on how their government response has been really great to in the context of the COVID crisis. And they really have tried to undermine target country institutions. And we were able to generate this kind of data from grassroots journalists and fact-checking websites. And this data set also led us to learn more about how COVID-19 misinformation and social media was being used by fact checkers. So this is based on a paper that we recently published in the Harvard Misinformation Review, and based on my work at ESOC Lab as well. So this gives you like a sample. We looked at about 15 fact-checking organizations around the world and their Twitter activity and user engagement to their Twitter activity about fact-checking. So here we saw that there was a lot of efforts, grassroots efforts by journalists to really fight misinformation. And you will see that in most cases, we saw like a big spike in the number of fact-checking stories during the COVID pandemic. Some of them started during the pandemic and were able to sustain over time. But we also see that a lot of them slowly haven't been able to keep up. For example, Falsu and Pesa Check. You can also see like Africa Check, the rate is going down. But in general, we can see that fact checkers really try to advance on their activities. This one is looking at the user behavior, and what we saw in terms of user behavior was there was a big engagement of users in the early stages, and then the user engagement started going down. So we also did some causal inference analysis using difference in differences method on this study. So you can see the paper, you can read the paper on the Harvard Misinformation Review, and what we also ended up like suggesting is fact checking in itself is not going to be enough to address misinformation, because people don't necessarily go to these fact checking articles, and so we need more better solutions to address misinformation, and we can't rely solely on fact checking because user engagement is not as sustained. And we were able to argue that using some of the data that we looked at. Lastly, I want to talk about this case of ProRepublica, which talks about machine bias. So I talked about a lot of good usage of data, but this is one of the bad usage of data where a lot of times software are used to predict future criminals and to decide when to release them. For example, in the US, this was an investigative journalism that revealed this big issue of machine bias, which was showing bias against the Black population in the US, because they were based on a lot of data and historical data. They were trying to predict future criminals. And you will see how based on the skin color, the machine was yielding higher score for a Black person, as opposed to it was giving lower risk score to a whiter person. And so you can see in the actual data, when these people were released 2 years later, the white person was the one who again reoffended, but the Black person has not been charged. Risk assessment scores like this are used in courtrooms to inform decisions about who can be set free at every stage of the criminal justice system, from assigning bond amounts or decisions about their freedom. And so if you take data at face value, you might say like it is so unbiased, and based on this risk score, I choose to release this person sooner, or I decide their term of punishment based on it. But if you look at it and take a step back and look at it, then this was a flawed usage of data, because the white person actually ended up committing the crime again, as opposed to the Black person. So I think based on this, we can also see how data can be misused. It can really cause a lot of biases. It can perpetuate these biases, and if we are not critical about looking at these kind of issues, if we don't try to understand these models, sometimes we might be making really big mistakes and even promoting things like racism. However, I think this is another example of machine bias. So a lot of times, women, especially in low and middle income countries, have limited access to mobile phones, internet, bank account. So because of all these reasons, their representation in machine learning training data can be not represented as much. And then we may use like this like not very representative sample to train our model and target interventions and behavioral insights. And so if women are missing and less visible or reflected in underrepresentative way in training data, then whenever we are designing policies, rules, or programs based on machine learning algorithms, it's going to amplify those biases. This is from a World Bank blog. So I think I encourage you all to think about these issues, and I think now we can move on to questions. So I'm going to stop my screen share.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation. I learned a lot, and um, hopefully everyone who is present here also learned a lot. So we are now moving on to questions, and only one of the participant has posted a question on chat, so I encourage you to post more questions. And until then, I will start with my first question. As as we all know, like, you work in the field of research and data science, and so I would like to firstly start with a question like, what inspired you to bridge the gap between research and data science, and how you started your journey with it?
Yeah, so I have always been interested in the public policy space. And given the influx of data and given how much is out there, it kind of motivated me to want to learn more about it and be able to pick up these skills and see if I can apply it to address development challenges or social policy challenges. I was also part of the Nepal data literacy program through Ravi and Lisa. I think she was here as well. I was part of this program, and that was also inspiration to learn more about these skills and brush on technical skills so I can improve on my understanding of the actual mechanics behind data and how this is used, and if I can also use it to address social policy challenges. So that's how I got interested. And we keep talking a lot about evidence-based policy making, and so I wanted to learn more about how we can really learn more in that space. So I think that's how I got motivated to learn more about it.
Thank you. That was a wonderful answer. Also, since you said like, um, so in data and research, we have people from a lot of different backgrounds. Like, uh, there are people who are working towards becoming data scientists and analysts, and they come from like who also aspire to become future researchers, but they come from like different workspaces. And do you think that the skills that we learn through like data science, and these skills will equip us to become like, to have our own voice irrespective of the workspace or the career we choose in the future?
Yes, absolutely. I think you can be a person who uses data to generate evidence, right? That is your choice. But I think in today's day and age, we don't have a choice as consumers of data and consumers of social media. Like, it's just everywhere, it's all around us, and it's in our society as well. So I think as consumers, at least, even if we don't end up being data scientists or data analysts, I think we become and even we don't have a choice in people who consume news, for example, right? So the way I think about it is, at least we can be smart in thinking about how social media is using our data, how people are targeting ads, how democracy is being affected by bad actors, or the example I gave you about this machine learning bias against the Black population in the US. Likewise, minorities all around the world, there's challenges that they might be discriminated through this way. So I think at least we will become a better and more smart in terms of like um, our own awareness. And I think that is an empowerment in itself. We have more critical thinking skills. So definitely the more we learn, the more we will be able to understand better. Even for me, initially, when people said machine learning, I didn't really understand what happens behind. And I thought everything that is done by machine doesn't necessarily have a bias, or that it is not as flawed. So the more you try to understand, the more you try to see that there's a lot of complexities in these models. There can be a lot of like also neural networks or all these more complex black box models that you can't fully understand what's going on behind the scene. And I think those kind of challenges, when they come, at least you will be able to question these with more confidence, if you have more insights into exactly how they are done, or even if you don't understand the exacts of it, at least you have some more insights into what is happening. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions from our participants, and one of the question is, um, so are there any steps taken to avoid the biases that you talked about? Like, if there are steps, like as a researcher or a person working in the data field, so is there are there people who are actively working on uh, like making these biases not so prevalent, like, so could you
Yeah,
provide a little bit
absolutely.
of insight?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are definitely steps that can be taken to avoid these biases. For example, when you train your model based on a historical data, but your actual data, once you have the actual data, you can always update these models to be more reflective of the actuals. And so your model will, machine learning, for example, those models will become less biased over time. That's one example. The other I told you is give you some examples of disinformation and how data was being used to really affect democracy and manipulate voter behavior. And we can really see that when professors, like the professor I work with at Princeton himself is part of the people who generated a lot of this kind of evidence. And social media companies reached out to these professors and they said, okay, we really need your help. We need to find ways to not make ourselves look so bad, because people are really misusing our platforms. So especially in the light of the COVID pandemic and the US elections recently, they took so many actions to the point that Twitter even banned like sorry, Twitter even banned Trump. So and deplatformed him. I think multiple platforms did that, right? So that came not because of just one person's effort, but it was like a huge effort from investigative journalism backed in data, as well as like research like this, which was able to really go and talk to policymakers and really go and talk to social media companies, for example. So similarly, when data like this came out, like this pro Republica case came out, many states stopped using this method of using this risk assessment score to decide on um, uh, giving punishment duration to offenders. Sorry. So people are always learning, and I think it's definitely possible to make these steps, but not as an individual easily. It would be more through a more being part of a much larger process, and always having that inspiration to keep fighting for, and not feeling like I can't do much with this learning, but trying to really work with civil society, work with people who policymakers, because they are the ones who at the end will be able to really make a lot more changes. So I think it's possible, and things are changing, and we need to keep trying to reduce these biases.
Yes. I would also like to ask you, since you have insight or you have experience because you have interned with UNDP in Nepal and worked in, especially in promoting financial literacy, how do you think data science can help boost developing countries like Nepal? And how much do you believe in the statement that says like big data for development?
So I do think there is a lot of potential in big data for development. There is a lot of potential because now we have so much data, and we can generate better quality evidence. Even when, for example, I worked with the Poverty Action Lab, and a lot of times it's very costly to do experiments. It's very costly to send surveyors on the field to generate evidence about a program that you may be trying to evaluate. But because of so much advancement in data today, it's possible to really live stream a lot of things. You can check on data much faster space and correct for errors that's coming from the field. You can check for outliers. There's also a lot of data on social media. So those can be used to address a lot of challenges. Similarly, I think because of how much potential there is, even platforms like Facebook, for example, before they didn't have anybody who looked at misinformation. Today, they are hiring data scientists to really target and remove misinformation from their websites. So so much has been improving in today's day and age. Today, they are also trying to survey people. Like Facebook, everybody is using Facebook these days. And not to say that this is representative of everyone, but it's just that it's picked up a lot in our generation, right? So Facebook has been partnering with researchers, for example, to conduct surveys, quick surveys from their population, to understand more about development challenges, to understand more about how the impact of COVID, for example, has been much worse on women, and even on gender and violence and economic impact. Many in terms of who lost more jobs in the pandemic, or who suffered more from partner violence. Like this kind of data also they have like been able to generate. And so I think I believe in this, but there's challenges, but there's also a lot of opportunity for big data and development. And I do think that it can be used to really boost developing countries. But I also understand that infrastructure, like as a developing country, we need help with infrastructure. We need better politics. We can't do a lot of things just with data, because we also need to have better politics and less corruption and infrastructure, like better technology and internet, and all of these things also have to keep up with. So that's a challenge that countries like ours face. And I think we've seen like lack of moral leadership, or just lack of good leadership in so many countries, including some challenges we've had in our own, in terms of how they address the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think it also requires better efforts from the government side.
Um, Thank you. So since we are on the topic of developing countries like Nepal, like we also have question that like when we publish our research paper or journals, like there are a lot of people who are from the background of publishing journals and stuff. So like what international forums are used to get information when we are working on journals, or like we want to publish an article? So where do we look at, like what international forums, like personally you, what do you like look into when you were writing your research paper and stuff?
Yeah, so I think when you start out, if you don't have experience, it's going to be challenging to really convince people to publish your work if they are really established publishers. So initially, I think what's really good is work on some projects, put it on GitHub, put it on blogs. Medium is a really good platform. Really be able to showcase some of the work you've done on online, because there's so much potential in online platforms that we don't need to go after platforms to initially showcase our work. And then I think once you have a little bit of credibility and experience through those processes, it's then the next step is to really see whose work do you really like in the space that you are working on. So for example, we were working on misinformation recently, and Harvard Misinformation Review is a journal that is uh, really working on producing more and more research in this space. So after that, we looked at, okay, if we want to publish something here, what are the requirements? What do they want? So then we saw that they had specific requirements on what are the things they would need in order to really make this something they might accept. So we tried to write a story, write a paper with data driven analysis that was specific to the instructions there, and we submitted it to them. And it can be a very rigorous process to publish in more established journals. um, but having that background of some support from professors, I think really helps to publish. But if I think as Nepali, we can also publish with our own university. I'm sure like TU and professors, I've seen that they have published a lot of work in this space. The central bank also produces economic review. So there are places where if you do a good work then and show some credibility, it's always possible to publish in those areas through more rigorous data-driven analysis. And if other platform is just newspapers, to be able to just write quick blogs with some data-driven analysis. World Bank has a lot of data-driven short blogs and op-eds that they produce a lot, right? So something like that we can do locally with our newspapers. There's so many newspapers and platforms, so we can write and we can also say like, we looked at data and here is some analysis that I did. And I think so all of that is possible, but it comes down to doing like a good quality work and convincing the editors and authors to really take your work.
Thank you very much. I also agree with that. I think like Code for Nepal publishes a lot of, not a lot, but we publish blogs. But when like we try to incorporate like how much of work we have done with the data and stuff like that. And while we are on this topic of like as a starter, I'm also a learner. I just started with data science and I don't have a lot of experience. So one of the participants have asked question that, do we have to be like a really good at maths to be learning data? Or like if we are in economics field and then we want to do something in that field, like how do we incorporate data when we are just starting off?
So I think the more better you are with quantitative skills, it will always help to do more in this space. Math, I think, is not necessarily a very strong requirement for applied data science, because there's a lot of packages and a lot of codes online. So just to give you an example, I myself am not a very, very heavy math person. And I had to do a time series analysis using vector autoregression model. I'd never done this before when I worked with my professor. So I went online and I tried to look up some codes on this, and I saw that Python's stats module package had a step-by-step example of how to take data that is in time series format and run the vector autoregression model. Now, if I really knew a lot of the math and the linear algebra and calculus behind this analysis, I think it would make my understanding better. But having said that, it's not like something that I couldn't do. I was able to run the code and really understand the basics behind how this kind of model can be used to do the time series analysis. So I think when you say math, you need obviously insights on some of the stats and understanding behind some econometrics, but I don't think you need to know everything to the level of matrix algebra and multivariable and real analysis and that level of like calculus to be able to do data science work. And if you're starting out, I think just learning more about data, learning more about stats, learning more about econometrics, R, Python, these are all like important ways to improve your skills. And the more you learn, the more confident you will be, the more you will be able to really understand things better. So I think if you are passionate about it, nobody needs to really come from a math background. Nobody needs to come from a heavy computer science background. Working with data, I think if you have the passion, there's so many resources, including I think most of you have access to data camp. So if you're interested and if you keep putting effort, I think it's something anybody can learn. It requires some it does require you to put the effort and the time to learn, but I don't think you need to have a lot of initial background to brush on these skills and take them to a higher level. um, so that's what I would say based on my experience, but you do need to have interest so that it motivates you to keep learning and improving on your skills.
Thank you very much. So I have another question is that since with Code for Nepal, I had been working with all the fellows, and I've seen that most of the most of the people who applied for the data fellowship were men. And I always question myself, like, what is keeping women out of data science? Like, I, as a woman, I was very interested in data science because I saw how much potential it had. But even though we try to aware people that there is as a woman you should like, especially women should apply the data fellowship, because I believe that women like, I truly believe that women can change the scaling up of AI and data science. And I think so. I always had this question. And so, what is your thoughts on the question that is there something that is keeping women out of data or data science or computer science? Have you, because you have worked in such so many fields with so many professors and so many, you have done a lot of research and you have published papers on cybersecurity, which also highlighted a point that women are underrepresented and which leads to biases. So, what is your take on this?
So yeah, I do think that a lot of times uh, it depends on context, from developed to developing country context, I think. For example, I don't think the issue is as much of like opportunity to get education if it is in the context of developed country, right? Women do have more opportunities to learn and get education that they want. But even here, there we saw like it was also very interesting for me to do this research on like women's participation in using digital financial services, being cybersecurity professionals, in STEM professionals. There is gap even in developed countries. So the issue is not always about access to education. However, it is one big reason for developing country context, I think. So first is obviously having access to these opportunities, which is also like affected by social norms and values for a lot of women in our communities. But beyond that, even when we have the opportunity and access, I think a lot of times women, we tend to really have imposter syndrome, and feel like we need to be really perfect at everything to really learn these new things and improve on our data journey, or like just be going further in this. So I think I want to encourage like more women to obviously put more effort and feel more confident. And in general, like we see a lot of disparity in STEM. Like women, I think till certain years of schooling, they are like doing better in sciences, data has shown. But after like certain years of schooling, there's a time towards higher education, like there's a dip in like women's involvement more. And this could be like a lot of social biases from early on, like women are given dolls to play with and men are given different kinds of toys to play with. So it starts from a really, really early age. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yes, I think I agree with that, and um, I hope more people will. We still are open to the fellowship, so I am trying to reach out to more women so that we can kind of change this bias that there is existing bias that is on improve. Like I mean, it will take time. So and so we also had an interesting question, which from one of our participants, and that is, do you see the feasibility of applying machine learning techniques, particularly using satellite imageries or disaster climate change related to issues in Nepal?
Yes, I do think that there's a lot of potential in applying these tools and learning and generating insights. But like I said again, being able to learn, yes, being able to really make good decisions and may influence public policy, that's going to require also like our leadership to be better. And I'm not really that sure about the current leadership and like that, but I'm hopeful about young leaders who will be coming in more into the public policy space and governance space and really be able to utilize data to make better informed decisions. So that's one. And the other is, of course, like in terms of youth mobilization, definitely, right? We already saw that in the context of Nepal earthquake or in the context of COVID-19, youths are already using like data platforms and technologies to really try to get volunteers and easily find better efficient ways to help communities that are in need. So I think for youth mobilization, coming together, we don't need government necessarily. We can do it on our own. And so many, I see like tech startups have emerged in Nepal. So many people have been like Forbes under 30. So like there's so much potential. And I do think that it's possible for us to do more in this space. But it's obviously going to be easier if we have better governance and support from that space as well.
Thank you. So, I think since we are talking about maybe like potentially becoming data researchers or data scientists, data analysts, I would like to question on like what kind of data ethics that future researchers and data scientists should have, because we will be working in this workspace in the future. I'll be involved, so everyone will be in some kind of way involved in this field. So like what kind of data ethics should we have as a future data scientist and researchers?
So I think definitely have two sets of things to say. Like I think one is not using data to always like you have a story in your mind, and to prove it you run after data, because sometimes you may have a hypothesis and the data speaks something else. And a lot of times this happens in social science as well, where if you have a hypothesis and your data doesn't support it, it's just like you, a lot of people just don't publish it. And I think that is bad, because even to have a hypothesis and it doesn't get proven by data, I think it's a learning, and it should be published, and it should be like something we put out there. So I think that kind of ethics of like, don't just use data to support what you believe in, but be open minded to have a hypothesis, use the data, test, and see like see where things go and how results come out. The other is being critical of the data, so that we're not perpetuating systematic biases. I think that's a very big challenge when you work for industry as a data scientist versus as a researcher. I think researchers, there's definitely more emphasis on ethics and using data to really generate more knowledge, to really advance knowledge. I think there is definitely a big challenge while working with industry. If you are working with a particular company, the data, the motive of using the data is how can the company make more money, um, and really do more of the profit making endeavors. A lot of times it can be like that. But I think we need to find a balance, and not always, not, it's not also true that always companies want to use data to make just profit and don't care about ethics. That's not true, because I, like I said, Facebook is already trying to address misinformation, Twitter is trying to address misinformation, they are trying to use their platforms to help people in disaster, or in other understanding more about development challenges through their surveys. So I think just having that open mind and critical thinking is the key.
And since, as you mentioned, yeah, like data is like every day we are bombarded with a lot of data, and as a normal, ordinary person, and but when we are specifically talking about working in the field of data science, there's obviously competition. So, how do we not become outdated as new technology arise? Like, how do we use our data science to make sure that we are on top of our games, and like doing things that would make us a little bit more successful, and like, so I wanted to ask that too.
Yeah, so I think there's a very cliche simple answer to that is just have to keep learning and keeping ourselves updated, because we don't really have a choice in terms of being updated without following latest advancements and really trying to learn new skills. So I think that's one. And following news, there is World Bank does a lot of these blogs. There are other like Medium and a lot of these other places where new and new posts on data and usage keep coming up. So I think following these kind of news, following the latest trends and what's developing, I think firstly through news, and then secondly through learning new, being open to learning new tools and technologies, I think is the way to go. It's definitely challenging to keep ourselves updated. I feel like I've worked in this space for quite a while now, and I still feel like I don't know enough. I don't know enough, because every day new things are happening. I start learning Python, then there's like something else comes up, and then I start learning that, and then another tool is used. You try to work with geodata. There, it's better to use a certain kind of tool to do that. A lot of statistical analysis and econometrics I used to learn in Stata, and now my program did a lot of R. And then in my job, we did so much of natural language processing, so it was better to use Python. So even like tools are changing every day. Every day, like we're learning more and more. Packages are changing every day. So I think the only way is to learn and keep ourselves updated and be willing to do that.
Thank you very much. I think so. I guess this is. I don't have. So we don't have a lot more questions now. I think we are done with the questions, and also, um, our time, we have a couple of minutes more. So on that note, I would like to first of all apologize for the initial Facebook. The event didn't work out. Like the Facebook, we had some technical issues. I was still figuring it out. I would like to apologize for that. And so I think all these questions, I have addressed all the questions. Okay, we have just one more question. Um, so, um, is there some advice you would like to give if people are switching into from another field to data science career?
Yeah, I think my advice is, and a lot of fellows, I think, have asked about this as well, in terms of not having a lot of background, or how do we know when things are enough. I think it's like I said, it's always possible to learn data science skills. A lot of people in my program came with zero data background. A lot of I myself had some very basic experience using data, but nothing very advanced. So I think it's possible. You have to be willing to learn and brushing on these skills, but it's fine to not have an academic background. Today, there is just so many online resources, including DataCamp, Coursera, a lot of online YouTube videos. Like, I learned so many things every day by following just YouTube videos. I just follow people. Like, I had to web scrape some data recently, or I had to just figure out a way to automate a Python file to run every day in cloud. I have never done anything like this. My program never taught me that, but I spend about a small amount of time in watching YouTube videos to automate that, and it worked. So sometimes it can feel very intimidating. I also feel nervous when I try to do something and it doesn't work in one go. And it can be very discouraging when you get like all those error messages when you're trying to code, or when you're trying to do something and you see error messages and you feel like you'll never be able to learn this. So those kind of moments happen. I think the key is to realize that even very experienced data scientists, like, they don't know everything very clearly and on top of their head. It's like having some background through tools that you are already being exposed to through DataCamp, and having being willing to go to places like just Google search or Stack Overflow. A lot of bloggers, a lot of people put information and resources online. So just going there and practicing and just keep trying, and having the motivation to continuously learn and keep trying and not giving up. I think that's the key. But even the best of the best data scientists, like, they will not know everything. And they will not know everything by heart in terms of coding or in terms of like models to use. There's just some background, but I think you already have are working towards having some background through DataCamp. So my advice is to keep learning. There's like so many classes. Even if you do like 5 classes that in DataCamp and complete it properly, with honesty and with dedication, and do the homeworks and assignments, like, you will learn so much that it will be like like doing a master's program. So if you already have that access for so many people, and I'm sure Code for Nepal can help more and more youths with that. I feel very inspired by what Ravi and Mia have put together, and really try to help a lot of Nepali youths have more access to this kind of learning opportunity. The rigor, the opportunity that's in that space is massive. So you don't need to have a lot of background, but start with the introductory classes, move on to the intermediate level classes. If you really have the passion, then you don't need to have any background to really learn. You can start today with intro, and you can move on to intermediate, and you can even move on to advanced. And those courses there, they are of like a solid masters, a solid even PhD people. Initially they do the 2 years of like master's level courses itself. So there's already that quality of content there, if you are willing to soak in that information and put the effort to learn from it.
Thank you very much. I think since I would also like to address that in coming like right now with the like the COVID cases getting worse here, I think we are a group of really enthusiastic people, and it is really getting hard for people to um, like concentrate with learning, still keeping ourselves motivated. So during this difficult time, I think um, like what do you think like as a learners we can do to help people who are going through this rough time in Nepal? And obviously we are all volunteers and we are youth, so we can make a difference. So what do you think we can we can do, or what do you suggest, some kind, if you have some kind of ideas for us?
Yeah, I think in terms of academic learning, I think just utilizing the opportunities you have to keep learning. If there are organizations, I'm sure there are organizations and also other youths that you can mentor from less privileged communities. Volunteer your time to help them, and that in itself, like I'm sure, like the pandemic has caused so many disrupted so many people from learning and having that kind of opportunity. So many people don't have what you already have. So being able to really help those communities in need is definitely something that we all can do and we should do. And that's one. The other is just not being too harsh on yourself. It's a very difficult time for so many of us, and many of us have faced personal losses. This is a time to really not be too hard on yourself. Sometimes it feels like you're not doing enough. You'll see social media, and when you see people doing more, and sometimes it's like we might feel like we're not doing enough, or it's easy to feel like everything is just so sad and depressing. But I think there is we have time to be learning new skills. Many of us, we have time to be with our loved ones because of the fact that a lot of working from remote opportunity has arisen. So use that time to support the family around you, support your friends around you. And I think it's possible to do that. I think as youths, being on platforms like this, I think if there's any way for us to be in a group and coordinate some way to pressurize the government, maybe we can write some together as a code for Nepal, supported by World Bank or something. We can maybe write something or publish something which is about the problems and how there has been inefficiency in access to vaccines, or some problems that we're seeing around us, right? So we can always collaborate and raise our voices against the injustices we see, or against the bad situation of management of COVID crisis in Nepal. So I think those kind of things we can do from our level. We can always volunteer our time to help communities in whatever way we can. And if we are in a privileged position to make donations, we can consider doing that as well. So I think there can be many ways to really collaborate and keep doing what you can from your level, and not to feel like you're alone in this, where it's a global pandemic. So I think this is the time when actually the whole world is together in this. So I think we need to keep realizing that and work towards overcoming this together.
Yes, I also that was really nice of you to say that, because I think I also received email from our fellows yesterday. Some of them were having symptoms and they were just notifying me that they could not do their data camp course right now. So that that made me question myself, like as learners, as students, what can we really do for students who lose their breadwinners of their family? and stuff like that. So as a coach for Nepal, as I'm working with Coach for Nepal, I think I'll be I just want to tell everyone that if anyone can reach out through emails and stuff like that, Coach for Nepal is always willing to help and willing to collaborate on things like that. And on that note, thank you very much for your time. And I would also like to thank everyone for their patience and joining this. I mean, this was a really fruitful session. I learned a lot, and I hope everyone else also learned a lot. And thank you very much. Will be hopefully I will have more sessions like this in the future too.
Yeah, thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity as well to share some of my thoughts, and let's stay in touch. I've shared my Gmail as well, so feel free to reach out. And sometimes I also want to say that sometimes if you don't hear back, it's not necessarily because somebody's trying to ignore you. Sometimes it's just because they have like a busy life, and I think sometimes I do that to myself. I apply to things or I write to people, and if they don't reply, I feel bad. So I think that's also something we shouldn't do. And let's stay connected, and always feel free to write to me, and let's hope that we'll have more collaborative engagements in the future. And thank you, Ravi, and thank you, Anshu, and the whole Code for Nepal team.
Thank you very much.